Episode 1. Are you ready? Are you ready for this?
Oh, we're calling it episode 1? Right.
Yeah.
Am I starting or are you starting?
Well, I think it's already started.
Well, we could do better than that.
Nope. R&D in the NC.
Welcome back to the show, sort of. But the new version of the show with slightly different letters.
How do the letters all fit together?
Well, we're still an R and we're still a D.
R&D.
And we're still in the QC, but the show now is R&D in the NC. So if you want to go back and find the old stuff, 118 episodes we did in 5 years on the Charlotte City Council. And we've taken a little bit of a...
little break.
What do we say?
Weeks.
A 38-month break.
I think it was 164 weeks since we've last caught up.
So,
as always, I've prepared us to
catch us up.
To catch us all up.
Here's a 90-second recap of the last 38 months.
164 weeks since, if you listened and you haven't gotten any news since then. Inflation went wild. AI showed up and immediately started doing everyone's homework and jobs. Charlotte built more apartments everywhere all at once. The 2024 campaign started way too early. It never stopped. College campuses turned into protest zones. The Olympics reminded us we still love random sports. You and I both. Absolutely.
And right around the corner. It's almost curling season.
It's 164 weeks is a lot of weeks. Huge hurricane hit Western North Carolina. New administration, lots of executive orders. Immigration went back to the top of the news. Uptown got somewhat busy again and concerts sold out. Safety still a question mark. The Carolina Theater opened after roughly 50 years. America's been planning its 250th birthday, and somehow 3 years just disappeared on us.
All right, and now you're caught up. In case the only way you ever consumed news since 2017 was the R&D and the QC podcast.
There's somebody's mind blown right now. They're like, what?
They've been in a coma since November of 2022 and woken up just in time for episode 1 of R&D in the NC.
So why is it episode 1? What's going on with us right now? Let's fill in our favorite people in the world, the audience of R&D, of what is going on.
So when you were last with your third favorite podcast hosts, I assume we're not anyone's favorite podcast.
Stop.
But maybe like second or third.
Okay.
So I was departing the Charlotte City Council. Tariq was starting a third term. Since then, we have both gone on to work in federal government. I have also gone on to work in state government. And now we are both headed back into the private sector from whence we came.
So let me pause and jump back to where you started. You left me on council.
And so I rolled off in September of 2022, which was like a super odd timing cycle because we'd had to delay the elections because of COVID. And so we did our second term was almost 3 years, but not quite. So then the council that got sworn in as I was leaving only did essentially a 1 year term. Then you had another election. So it was a very odd
So I filled almost
there.
2 full terms, almost, after you left. And I will just start by for our loyal listeners back then who knew us almost on a weekly basis at that time, it got increasingly less fun for me without you there, even though you are a Democrat in the R&D side and I am not. I want to just tell you, I did miss you.
There were 4 of us there, or 4 of us that I guess you'd served with pretty much the entirety of your time at that point. Me, Julie Eisel, Matt Newton, and Greg Phipps, who left and then came back while we were on council. So we all 4 departed at the same time. So there was a lot of a sea change there.
I had Braxton for a while after you.
And our last 2 episodes of the podcast, I went back and looked today. We're actually introducing folks to the 2 newest members of the Charlotte City Council. 2 of the people that got back on council had been there before, Lawana Mayfield and James Mitchell, and then Marjorie Molina and Dante Anderson were both new to that for the first time council members, and we'd interviewed them in episodes 117 and 118. So that feels like a million years ago.
So since then.
So I left with full intention of just going back into the alcohol business, which I'd been in for 15 years. Got a call from my then state senator, Jeff Jackson, and he said, as you're well aware, I'm running for Congress, and if I win, would you be interested in being on the team? And I very much was. So I said yes to that. He did end up winning, and I served for the 2 years that he was in the United States House of Representatives as his district director, so I was running his Charlotte and Gastonia offices, team of 6 people here, and really, really enjoyed that experience. We had an amazing team, but we suspected that he would, and then subsequently he was drawn out of that district pretty shortly after he got there. So not even a viable option for him to run for re-election. He decided to run for a statewide office as Attorney General,
which was a rough race.
It was him and Dan Bishop. So
yeah.
it was the only. There were only 2 races, I think, in that cycle where 2 sitting members of the United States House of Representatives were running against each other. This was one of them. Dan and Jeff were both serving in Congress. There was another where 2 guys got double bunked in Alabama and were running against each other for 1 seat in Congress. So that was a very expensive and raucous race. Jeff won it. And so then I served as his Director of Intergovernmental Affairs in the Attorney General's office and the Department of Justice for the year 2025. And I think he's doing a great job. Got to admit, I didn't love state government as much as I enjoyed working in Congress. But then an opportunity presented itself to the both of us, and it was one I just ultimately couldn't say no to.
So before we leave that, you and I obviously maintained contact during those periods. Seemed like your favorite part through all of that you just laid out was, again, that district leader role.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me you really loved the team you had put together. Just give the listener just a little bit of flavor of kind of what that experience was like.
Yeah, I mean, so every member of Congress has got a district office and a district team, and so if you come from Wyoming, where there's only 1 member of the United States House of Representatives, they're covering the whole state. In our case, obviously, there are 14 members of the House from North Carolina. You're divided up, and Jeff's district was fairly compact because the Charlotte area is so dense. And so we had a little over half of Mecklenburg County, and then we had most of Gaston County. So we had district office in Charlotte, district office in Gastonia, and we were really the liaisons between all of the people back here that Jeff represented and his team in D.C. who was helping him more on the legislative side of things. So anytime people, I mean, the joke is that people say, oh, when you've got a passport issue, call your congressperson. That's like number 1 thing that every congressional office gets is passport issues, but they actually can very much help solve them. And
those
solve
are my
them more
favorite
quickly.
to get because I would
You
get
know
them all
exactly
the
what
time.
to do.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, well, I get to hand this
I know
off
exactly
to you
what
guys.
to do. And your congressional office can solve those things. But then it's obviously things that are even far more important involving IRS or VA or any of these kinds of things that folks might have an issue with a federal agency. We can help solve those. And then we're also sort of the eyes and ears of the people that Jeff represents for him when he obviously is spending a great deal of time in D.C. And so it was I still got to do a lot of what I enjoyed about being on council in terms of that community engagement, being involved in policy discussions, but got to leave behind a lot of the things I didn't really enjoy about Charlotte City Council, which was the part-time pay despite it being a full-time job, and just the amount of vitriol that anybody who's in elected office receives on a week-to-week basis. Being on the staff side of things, you just don't get a whole lot of that. And Jeff doesn't have a whole lot of haters, so that made life a little easier too. I imagine if you worked for one of the more polarizing members of either party, it could be a little bit more tumultuous, but mostly smooth sailing. It was a great experience. And then you got to have a little dose of federal government life too.
I did.
Yours was in D.C. though. I got to stay here in Charlotte, which was nice.
That probably made all the difference in the world, I would say. But so you left me in city council by myself for a lot of years. That has all been well documented. It was tougher than our first 2 years, that honeymoon period when we all came in 2017. But I still enjoyed parts of it. Then randomly an opportunity kind of fell in my lap. I was not looking for it whatsoever. Some good friends of mine that were part of the transition team and working with the White House were all sitting there, and somebody was like, who do we know across this country that is Republican and has a touch point to transit in some way? And while I definitely never claimed that I was some kind of transit czar or that was what I went to school for and was an expert in, one thing was clear. I had spent the last many years here locally with transit being one of our number one issues. And as a super minority, as a Republican here in that environment that both had the Republican principles that made a lot of this challenging, yet also didn't make transit the enemy. I really liked aspects of transit when done properly. There was some buzz building up there, and I was called and asked if I would consider it. So a lot of people if you fast forward into my experience, they're in that space as presidential appointees their entire career. And they're, sometimes they make both administrations, sometimes they wait for their side to come back on. But it's a very standard thing that they do as a career. And for myself, I wasn't looking for it. I kind of did the interviews almost, I wouldn't call it a joke, but this is an honor. I have no intention of taking this, and I want to be able to tell the story when I'm older. Oh, yeah, I was vetted and asked to do it, and I turned it down ultimately. And then by the end of it, I was talking to a few mentors, and I was like, they've offered me this, and it's a big deal for Charlotte and the topic that we have in transit. And, I'm going to say no. And a couple of my mentors were like, you can't say no. You have to do this. So I think a lot of people didn't know, usually you're going after something like that. I was not, and then I went along with it as a joke / honor. And then as I got to the end of the process, I really liked the Secretary of Transportation and several of the folks up there. And then I just said, all right, I'll take a leap. So I very quickly, everything kind of happened all at once. And I announced I was resigning from council, of which that's a big deal unto itself, while announcing that this was where I was going to be going. And as I made that transition, I learned an awful lot in a short period of time. Moving up and getting a condo in D.C., my family came up there with me for parts of the summer so we could be together. And I would just kind of end cap that all by saying I learned a ton. I was able to do a lot. Hopefully in some of the episodes of R&D and the NC going forward, as we talk about transportation and transit, I'll pull some gems out of my experience there, and grants and surface transportation reauth and the AI stack we were building and all kinds of different stuff like that. But I think the punchline was I made a lot of great friends that I'll have for life, and I still talk to every week. Learned an immense amount, but at the end of the day, I came in as the acting administrator, waiting for the full-time administrator, Mark Molinaro, former congressman who's now been confirmed by the Senate, and he's in there, great guy. I was in that initial transition period of last administration to this administration, which that is a incredibly complicated time to navigate, and I learned a lot, but I was getting real homesick when Molinaro came in and was finally sworn in and kind of handed the baton, and I supported him in my deputy administrator role. I was kind of getting to the end of my kind of tenure there as it related to, this is great, but it's tough. It's being away from home in the prime of my career when I want to be doing stuff. This is a big bureaucracy. And that bureaucracy, as you probably got some tastes of, I know you got it in the state level as well, it isn't a place for an entrepreneur, startup CEO kind of person, founder kind of person to go in and move as fast as they want. So with some of those frustrations building, I was like, I could probably do another year or so, and that would be a more normal time, but it was about 5 months, and I decided it was time for me to come back to Charlotte, be with my family, and continue on with the local work that I really appreciate.
So, for one, did you ever get to meet our future president, Pete Buttigieg, as he was passing the baton?
I actually didn't, but I was a part of many meetings where the new folks there were like, oh, he left this huge backlog of grants that he announced, but now we have to process and deal with. So I did have that experience.
Fun side note about Tariq's hiring process. I was one of the people that I don't know who does the vetting. I don't remember. The guy's not like Secret Service. Who would it be? The FBI, probably.
CIA, yeah, absolutely.
I think it must have been FBI. But I get a phone call one day.
That's right. I forgot about this.
And they asked me some of the wildest questions. I mean, and I guess they have to.
They were like, we need, it was a substantial process. We need someone who served with you on council. And immediately I was like, Larken?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I had and I was in the car driving back from Asheville, so I had nothing but time.
You made a lot of jokes, didn't you, if I recall?
I made a few jokes. I actually got the agent to laugh at one of them. I won't repeat it.
He did not laugh when he spoke to me.
Yeah, but it was a otherwise very serious conversation, and they ask some questions where, when you know the person they're asking about, you can't help but laugh at how absurd the question is. But I guess they got to check the boxes.
And for that level where you have to have top secret clearance and above, I don't think every single government appointment is like that. But when you get into the spots where you're going to have to go into the SCIFs and have that clearance, they do not take that lightly. I can tell you that for sure.
There's a couple people that I'm now wondering how they got through this process and managed to get the jobs they got. But In your case, obviously.
Well, thank you for speaking so well of me during that.
I don't know if I spoke well of you so much as I didn't cause them any concern.
So we're back now here after those two. We've caught up on the last 164 weeks of news. We've recapped where we have been on our winding kind of separate journeys. And now I think it's a good time to transition into the news that dropped last week. This is our first episode of R&D in the NC, now rebranded, which is going to be important.
I'm going to have to get used to saying
I know,
that
me too. I'm gonna slip.
The number of times that we've said the name of the old podcast over the course of the last 8 years is going to be a hard habit to break.
But just to, I'll tee it up and then you knock it down. About 2 years ago, as part of that whole journey, I had initially seen this opportunity in Charlotte to, look at this greenfield environment where there isn't as much as some other cities our size of a government affairs and a strategic consulting kind of industry. There's certainly some of that happening. A lot of it's happening inside organizations individually. But it's just this environment where, whether it's locally in Raleigh or nationally or even across into other states, this isn't really a thing that a lot of organizations think about as, oh, I've got a chief sales officer, a chief marketing officer. Should I be thinking about government affairs and broader kind of strategy like this as a part of my critical roadmap and path as a company? And so I had originally kind of pitched it and brought it and talked to the Southern Group, which is now where we sit today. But back then, 2 years ago, I said, there's just this really unique spot in Charlotte that could play a really important role. We had a bunch of conversations, and then nothing happened from that point as we moved on into other objectives. It kind of got cold on the back burner.
But around that same time, they were launching a Raleigh office.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
They were launching the Raleigh office with Kevin Wilkinson, then onboarded Jason Sane, former appropriations chair, and a few others. But I kind of wiped it from my memory. And then as you and I both are kind of approaching, okay, what are we doing next? I'm back in Charlotte, and we get the call from them saying, hey, would you guys be interested in launching the Charlotte office of the Southern Group? And for me, and I'll let you take it from here, but the three things I like the most, I think the punchlines of what this new venture is for us. One, it's a chance for you and I to work together again. I didn't know how much I liked you until you were gone. It feels weird to say that out loud.
Yeah, it does. It feels weird to hear it out loud.
To be, both someone I appreciate and enjoy working with, but also somebody from the other side of the aisle where we can, kind of debate and battle it out sometimes, knowing that we're going to hug it out afterwards. That's not just good for a podcast and for communicating important information to the public. It's also good for working down this path. So that's one. Number two is, it has both half the feel that I love of a startup where we're launching a new market, not just a new organization in the market, but a market that's green field as it is. But we also don't have to do everything from scratch. We have the infrastructure of the Southeast, one of the largest firms that does this here, back office support, awesome team in Raleigh already, awesome team in DC and several other places. So to have all of that and still feel like a startup, like it's the best of both worlds. And then, finally, I think the most important thing you and I would probably agree on is it's always been our side hobby, R&D and the QC in the beginning. It's a mechanism not just for us to long form chat through important local issues, but now with R&D and the NC, continue that and make sure local politics is so important. And there are so few resources to be able to go and hear really what's going on. And the result of that, you get 15% turnout in odd years, electing the people who touch your life the most. So for me, being able to come and not just do this work and help progress the city, but also communicate through these channels in a unique way that we have done for so many years, making sure that people know what's going on in their backyard.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that the 3 years that since I left council and since we stopped doing our previous podcast and stopped doing our appearances on Capitol Tonight with Tim Boyum on Spectrum, I mean, I still had people on a fairly regular basis that would come back and go, man, I really missed the podcast, or man, I really missed seeing you guys on Spectrum, or whatever it was. And that's always nice to hear. I do think that there's just a gap in terms of outlets like what we were trying to do that are having, there's plenty of outlets that have Democrats and Republicans screaming at each other on television. You can find that anywhere you want. And there's plenty of outlets that have Democrats in an echo chamber talking to each other, Republicans in an echo
But
chamber
even
talking to each other.
even in that, it's mostly national news.
Yeah, and it's definitely more national level. But I mean, even state and local level, there's some podcasts that I think that do some of each of those. And not to say that there's no need for that, or there's certainly a demand for it. But we found there to be a demand for something a little bit more calm and that has some middle ground.
Calm. That's what we're pretty much known for.
Yeah,
you
well,
and I.
I don't know that calm's the right word, I guess. But
Fun.
But yeah, a little more lighthearted, even though a lot of these are obviously very serious issues. For me, I think one of the main motivators, I said at the beginning that I didn't find as much fulfillment in the state role as I did in the federal role. That had nothing to do with the team. In both cases, Jeff had built an amazing team, people that I know and like and will be in touch with and be close to for years. And I think they're doing amazing work at the Department of Justice. It was a whole different world for me, though, because unlike having the team of 6 in Charlotte and in Gastonia and not only getting to lead that team, but just getting to work side by side with them every day. Obviously, we're in communication every day with the D.C. team, but we had a team where you're actually in the office and you're actually, can walk over to someone's desk and talk to them about something, or they
But
can
you're
walk in your
also
office and help.
close to the constituents.
Yeah.
I find, and I think you would probably agree, the further away you get
interactions
from the constituents, the more like you forget.
Theoretical
like,
it
becomes theoretical.
Yeah.
It never was theoretical in Charlotte City Council because people are staring at us weekly.
Sometimes we wished it was more theoretical.
When you're in D.C., I would literally be inside the DOT headquarters, and I'd go in early in the morning, leave when it's dark, and like I would forget I was even in D.C. Like you're just in
Staring
this
at a
huge
computer,
apparatus.
Yeah. And the people that you're serving become statistics that you'll probably never meet. That was not so. It's part of losing that team element, which I really like, and having the day-to-day interactions. I mean, I think we are both very social creatures. We thrive on those interpersonal interactions, and I lost a lot of that just by the nature of the org chart and the fact that I was really the only person in Charlotte. And then impact, I think, as much as obviously the private sector pays better than the public sector, and money is something that we all take into consideration. That was never as much of a motivator for me as like feeling like I was having an impact. And so on city council, you're paid very poorly, but you can have a very direct and very quick, in some cases, impact on outcomes for people and for policy and for the direction of our city. In Congress, it was a little bit more ad hoc in terms of I didn't have a day-to-day impact on like big policy decisions, and in Congress those things inherently move slowly anyway. But there were projects that I was able to work with then Congressman Jackson on to identify needs that he was then able to go get in the budget for water infrastructure projects in Gaston County. Like these are things that are not making news headlines because they're not all that exciting, but they're real exciting if you're the town in Gaston County that needed a $4 million infrastructure investment because you've got 100-year-old water infrastructure. So those were really cool things that the people they impacted really appreciated. And then literally just solving people's like passport crises. It wasn't me, it was folks on my team who had experience doing that for Congressman Price before, another former member of North Carolina delegation to the U.S. House. But I had this amazing team of people that knew how to fix these problems, and so people knew to call me because they're like, oh, Jeff's guy, call Larken. And then I'm putting them in contact with somebody who's got 10 years experience doing this and solving these problems for people, and 3 days later they're calling going, man, you just saved my kids' study abroad or whatever it was, and really feeling like on a week-to-week basis I was not only contributing to the success of my boss but also improving outcomes for the people that he represented and many of whom I used to represent. So that was all very fulfilling to me, and I didn't get to do as much of that in the role at DOJ. And again, no one's fault. I think it's just the system and sort of the way the org chart was and budgets and things like that. But very glad I had that experience, met a bunch of amazing folks, learned some stuff about state government, and got to do a lot of intergovernmental, particularly at a local level, as well as with the congressional offices, who I obviously knew from my time there, but got to work with a lot of local town managers and small town mayors and police chiefs and things like that. So that was very cool. But this opportunity, I think we both see it as something where we'll be working with a lot of local businesses. We'll be working with local nonprofits. I think we've started to open up some conversations with folks in the education sector. And so there's all these things we can do around the exact same stuff that we ran for the city council. And things that we both worked on beyond that. Like we want to see outcomes for the young people in this community improved in terms of education. We want to see public safety improved. We want to see our transportation network improved. All the things we were talking about on the old podcast and our old jobs are things that now we have a whole different sort of avenue into the conversation on and can change outcomes, we hope and believe. Whether it's here locally, whether it's at the state level, we've got a team in D.C. that we can tap into as needed there. So for me, it really just boiled down to impact. And God bless Jeff and our team there. I left it with their blessing and their encouragement to take this opportunity if I felt like it was right for me. Would certainly love to be on Jeff's team again at some point in the future. But like you, excited about the sort of startup nature of being able to build something from the ground up, which is really what that district office role in Congress felt like, because there'd never been a 14th congressional district until Jeff was elected to it. And so we were not taking over an office from anybody. We were starting it new, which comes with a lot of headaches. But we were kind of a startup in that way. And even through those frustrations, it's an incredible learning opportunity and an incredible opportunity to kind of shape and mold the way something's going to move forward. And I think we've got that again here.
Yeah, no, I think to kind of put an end cap on that, we're closer to the work we truly loved and enjoyed. And that's for Charlotte, for the surrounding towns and counties, but also out to, all the way to Wilmington. If it's North Carolina, Asheville, you name it, we have touch points and possibility to help there. But it also takes not just our passion, but then these two paths we've been on for the last several years. It's not just municipal understanding, it's also now state and federal level, bringing that expertise back to the table. You with hospitality and tourism experience, me with technology and startups and banking, the ability for us to take all these puzzle pieces that we've been working on and now put them together to focus on, not just the city we love, but the skills that we got early episodes of R&D in the QC when we were co-chairs of intergovernmental relations. The key there, and something I've never forgotten, is how to craft a legislative agenda. It's so important. And the difference between crafting a legislative agenda, if you're the city of Charlotte or if you're a small nonprofit or a huge company in the private sector, is the difference between thinking about you need someone like us in the new venture we're doing when a problem arises versus thinking about it strategically as it relates to what do I want to accomplish, much in the same way that your product team is thinking about that and your marketing team is thinking about their topics. This is an opportunity for us to take those skills and come in and say, okay, well, it's not just you have issues with the city or you want to get ahead of issues with the city or the state or even the federal government, but like one of the best stories in the Southern Group kind of onboarding processes we're learning that we learned from down there in Florida is that there's a bunch of clients down there that don't need any government affairs help at all. There's a landscaping company that's been a longtime client because they have an opportunity at events and different things to network across all the other clients and get business. So whether it's that, whether it is the government affairs help or tossing stuff up to our Raleigh team or the DC team, or even just coming and helping organizations kind of craft strategic plans, there's just so much green space for us to figure out how this is going to work.
I mean, so much of it is just dot connecting both in the sense of connecting people to other people where there's opportunities, but also dot connecting in terms of connecting an objective with an idea or a means of framing it that will make it more effective or more likely to succeed. And that's certainly been, I think, one of our collective strong suits is that dot connecting of when you've got an issue. It's not just about identifying the issue. It would be nice if it was as simple as just identifying the issue, but you've got to know how to navigate the processes to solve the issue. And now we've both got pretty decent variety of experiences that have given us a better understanding of how to navigate those systems.
And I've deeply missed the things you bring to our relationship as well, like
intelligence, humor,
geography, knowing how to get somewhere where things are, anal retentiveness, your ability to.
It's called being organized.
Organized. Yes, all of these things, amazing, man.
Yeah.
It's so nice. I'm wondering how
someone
long
has to be the adult in the room.
How long it'll take for me to get annoyed.
Sick of it again.
Yeah. How long?
Well, clearly longer than it's taken me to already get sick of you again.
Yes, agreed. And we're also, side note, we're back on Tim Boyum, Capital Night. You mentioned that earlier. All 100 counties. This is a lot of fun because it enabled us to.
I did miss that a lot. That was one thing with the roles we were in.
So much fun.
We had to give up a lot of the sort of fun stuff that we get to do, like speaking engagements, media appearances, things like that, which are fun, but are also a great way for us, particularly with Spectrum and Capital Tonight. We've talked about in launching this new venture with the Southern Group, we've talked about how we often feel like Charlotte is underrepresented outside of Charlotte and doesn't always have a seat at the table or a voice in the room. But I think that holds true too in the media universe, because there are people who might be a Panthers fan because they live in North Carolina, but they don't necessarily know all of the good things that are going on, or frankly the challenges that are going on in our community. And I think for us to be able to be those cheerleaders for the Charlotte region more broadly on a show that is really a Raleigh-based show is not only fun for us, but it's also good for our region to draw attention to the positive things that are happening.
Plus, we love getting to hang out and listen to Tim Boyum's dad jokes and all that stuff. And now, second week in a row, we've been going on with Bo and Beth on WBT 107.9 in the mornings in studio for an hour. I think that is looking like that may be a more regular thing. So it's the ability for us to kind of really on multiple paths, kill multiple birds with one stone.
Draw attention to things that
Exactly.
deserve attention.
Yeah. So
whether they're
I think
challenges or successes.
That'll be a lot of fun. So this episode has been probably a little unique from the R&D and the NC episodes to come, where we really get down and talk more into specific topics because we needed to catch everybody up on 164 weeks. What's been happening? We're not going to
and where we're headed.
Yeah, and where we're headed. But now I think we kind of end cap the show with a little bit of rapid fire,
a little more current events,
lightning round, a few topics. And again, I think the purpose, and we're going to be structuring and refining the show as we go along. Excuse me, with a lot of forethought and discipline, as I like to think of it. But
That's your strong suit.
The punchline on this is we want to highlight a couple things that you may have heard a blip of, you don't have an angle, so that we give you a quick angle of this is important local news or regional news, something of that nature, something you need to know. And here, the next time you read something, look for this angle. Or the next time you're at a water cooler, I don't know if those exist anymore, you can mention this or this point. Again, starting to build that understanding and that more consensus of paying attention by local folks to the local issues that matter most. So with that being said, Larken, we've got a few. We're going to do them quick. We'll do it more later.
Again, quick is our strong suit.
Quick is our strong suit for longtime listeners. So how about midterm primaries? Been some news there. If you were a random person who is coming back and listening to R&D and the NC now, you haven't been paying attention much to the local stuff. What's the one or two angles that you, next time you read a story or next time you're talking to somebody, you might want to look deeper into, ask questions about, maybe make a point to somebody else on?
Well, one thing, it's wild, and it's always this case with the midterms, but it's wild how quickly this comes up on us, because we literally just installed,
Totally.
a month and a half ago, the new city council and the new school board, and yet we're like, I think less than 3 weeks from the beginning of early voting.
It was like 2 weeks after they were sworn in that filing closed.
Yeah. So that turnaround time in this part of the cycle is kind of wild.
But pause. This is an important point, because nerds like us think about odd years just as big as we think about midterms and presidential cycles. The average person, it's like 15% turnout is your normal thing for odd years. So they're thinking about the midterm the whole time. This was all there was. So I think that's a really important point. It's not the topic that I just brought up, because this is the midterm. But the reason why to us it seems so jammed together, and for the 5 or 10% of people who pay attention, is because we think about the local stuff.
So as people are looking at the midterms more high level.
I heard there's a sheriff's race. Is that
there
true?
is, but I was just going to say, I think a lot of people are already looking towards November, because obviously the people who are going to end up running as the nominees for U.S. Senator Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley, in almost all likelihood, that's going to be one of the most, if not the most competitive and expensive U.S. Senate race in the country.
But a ton of this stuff is going to be decided
right.
before then, and that's just over a month away.
But people are, I think they're focused on that one, and it's obviously the most high profile. And then there's a state Supreme Court, Anita Earl's seat is up, and she'll be running for re-election. Those are going to be huge elections, but those are not really going to be until later in the year, despite the fact that you're already starting to see ads for all of them. But to Tariq's point, most of probably 80+% of the state legislative seats, state House, state Senate, they're all up for re-election. Probably 80% of those races, if not 85 or 90, will be decided in the primaries because the seats are either safely one party or the other. A lot of things, you mentioned sheriff, and we'll get into that one in a second. There's literally not a Republican running, so the Democratic nominee will be the sheriff-elect. There are 4 people running for that. And so there's a number of these things that people aren't paying as much attention to. The early voting starts in like 3 weeks and the election's in like 6 weeks. And they'll think, oh, the election's in November, and for all intents and purposes, it'll already be over. And so that's why it's important for people to engage in these primaries and understand that, sure, Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley is going to be decided in November. Anita Earls and Sarah Stevens is going to be decided in November. But a lot of other things that are critically important to the day-to-day operations in government are going to be decided on, I think it's March 3rd, and you'll have missed the boat if you don't weigh in now.
So if you're a normal person out there who's in the majority and only pays attention to the national stuff, what's probably on your radar right now is, Cooper Whatley Senate race, right? And then 2028 in the presidential race. These down ticket items in this even year are going to be really important. And if, again, to help you as you evolve and pay more attention to this stuff, I think there's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple non-foregone conclusions that you're going to want to pay attention to and that matter. One is, how will the endorsements that are left in this community that make a difference matter? And for the sheriff's race, which is one of the main ones, we've got Sheriff Gary McFadden. He's had a number of years of being incredibly high profile and it not being without a touch of drama in it. And I would say it's probably shocking, the most powerful political endorsement, at least for Democrats, which Charlotte is mostly all Democrats, is the Black Political Caucus, and they just came out and endorsed the incumbent Sheriff Gary McFadden against 2 folks that are running three in the primary against him. But the only other endorsement that really is powerful and matters around here, to a lessening extent over the years, but still meaningful, is the Charlotte Observer. And I think we can assume that Gary McFadden is not going to get that. So to me, you've got those 2. Then you also have those couple House races where BPC and others have gone a different route for a couple of those folks who have been a little more bipartisan, stood with the majority in the General Assembly. So what would your punchline to people who may not be paying attention to this but might start looking into it more now that they've heard this?
Yeah, I mean, so Sheriff McFadden has had a number of controversial stories that have come out over the last particularly 6 to 12 months and had him somewhat embattled. And I think people saw an opportunity. So as is often the case when somebody is looking like they might be vulnerable, instead of getting one alternative candidate, you get multiple. And in this case, there are 3 alternative candidates, 2 of whom seem to probably be stronger than the third. And I think this BPC endorsement might well be the difference maker here. He did. Sheriff McFadden not only got that endorsement, he got it with over 50% of that body. And as I've talked about, I think we discussed on Capitol tonight, the endorsement is not so much just that people will blindly follow that ballot card, but it's the army of volunteers that they have that stand out at polling places. And so and we both know, having run local elections, if you could have someone standing at every important polling place and handing out your stuff, you'd have a real leg up on the competition. It's just hard to do that from a staffing perspective, particularly because in most cases you're not paying them.
It matters a lot more. I don't think it matters that much in odd year local elections. It matters somewhat, but when you're talking about midterms where a lot of people
going to vote for Roy Cooper or Michael Whatley.
Last year, if you're coming in to the primary in District 6,
you know
where the
something
top,
already.
you pretty much know who you're voting for. But that's 15%
Yeah.
turnout. You're talking 50, 60% turnout.
Who know about the Senate race, who know about maybe the congressional
and so
race.
they come in and they don't know, and
especially
they can
on the
be
down ballot
convinced.
stuff. And so I think that that's going to be very close. I think the fact that there are multiple alternatives certainly increases Sheriff McFadden's chance of reelection. I think the BPC is a huge shot in the arm for him, and that army of volunteers they'll have out at the polls handing those out sort of validates him despite some of the challenges he's
Were
had
you
in the media.
surprised at that BPC endorsement?
I was, but people who would have better perspective than I would on the Black Political Caucus were not. And a couple that I talked to had even predicted that he would get it ahead of time. So, again, I think a lot of the Black Political Caucus's endorsement, I think you have a distinct advantage if people have known you for a long period of time and have seen you for a long period of time. And so you can't build relationships. It's a group that's been powerful and influential for decades. It's not a group you can just parachute into like a month before they decide their endorsements and likely get the endorsement. It's one that you've got to build relationships. You've got to build trust over time. And people have known Sheriff McFadden for decades, going back to his well-documented tenure at CMPD as a homicide detective. So I think there are people who would look at that and say, sure, there have been some challenges of late in the sheriff's department, but this is a guy I've known 40 years, and I think a lot of them would say I'm not going to throw away the 40 years that I've known him because of issues that have happened just in the last year. Now, alternatively, some of the local state house races that are very close, there were two particular state house members who had upheld the veto, worked with Republicans to uphold a veto, or override a veto, of Governor Stein's on a very controversial bill. And the caucus endorsed one of those two people who took that controversial vote, but not the other. And I think the difference there, people have certainly heard about Carla Cunningham in this situation. And I think the big difference there is she not only took the vote she made a speech about it, which she's since apologized for, but many people found to be very inflammatory and very offensive.
I think the speech is the difference maker.
Because Representative Majid, who also took the same vote, who we both know and like, he just took the vote and sat there. He didn't feel the need to comment on it. And I think in the commenting on it, whether intentionally or unintentionally, Representative Cunningham said some things that have really come back to haunt her. And again, she has apologized for it, but I think for a lot of people it was too little too late. So in that race, they've endorsed Rodney Sadler, who's a local minister, pretty well known. And again, I think is someone people had known before he started running for office, and I think that makes a big difference. Representative Majid has a very likable opponent too, but not as maybe well known for as long with that particular group. And again, Representative Majid, there wasn't a video clip or snippets that people could pull out as quotes and hold up to use against him. He just took a vote that he took. He didn't have a bunch of commentary about it that came back to bite him. So
is that the lesson learned here? If you're going to take a uncomfortable vote against your base, like just don't say anything?
Well, I mean, I do actually. I'm kind of torn here because I found a lot of the comments that were made to be problematic. And yet I do want to hear from people, and I think this is what you and I tried to do on the podcast while we're on council. I do think that people, when they take votes that people are going to disagree with, I do think that we then and they now as elected officials owe people an explanation. You should tell people how you came to the decision you came to. And a lot of times that context will allow people to maybe forgive you for something they disagreed with because they might not have understood how you came to that decision. And maybe your elaboration isn't going to change their mind, but they go, okay, well, I hadn't really thought about it that way. That happened a number of times with me. I'm sure it did with you when we do the podcast. So I don't want to discourage people from explaining their votes.
Yes.
And yet, I mean,
yes.
Like if you make an impassioned speech, I don't know how planned it was or wasn't. You need to be thinking about what you're saying because, I mean, everything you say can and will be used against you. So I do want people to speak from the heart, but if that was speaking from the heart, I think that was something that people couldn't get past.
Look, I see the issue with the speech, definitely. I know that's maybe a difference maker and everything, but one thing that annoys me is, being in the super minority in Charlotte with Democrats in control helped me uniquely understand the difference in being in the super minority in the state from the other side. And people, I think, need to be more open within reason to people coming across the aisle, recognizing that there's a majority or a supermajority of the other party and collaborating, understanding that that was the people's voice and decision that put that combination of folks up there. And you have to negotiate to get some things done. So you're not just sitting up there, you know, and having your vote counted, go home and you make no difference. And I find, you know, it's different in each scenario, but I find that there are some Democrats up there that really put in that effort, that spend time with the majority, and they get a lot of stuff done. And even they get their hands smacked more than not. And I just wonder sometimes, are people just sitting there and saying, oh, we just want to win and take over control, and until that happens, we don't care if anything happens. And I think that's short-sighted.
There's two ways to do that, though. And so there's a couple of somewhat embattled Democrats in eastern North Carolina who have very competitive races this year. And if you look, what they've done, sort of to your point, is they've said, okay, well, I can make some deals, and there's nothing illegal or improper per se about this. I can make some deals with Republicans to support them on certain things, and they'll support me getting certain things for my district. And I think that's just a decision that voters need to make with clear eyes about, okay, do we want someone who's going to go down there and do whatever it takes, even if it maybe goes against the values we believe in as Democrats, to bring back resources for a district. Particularly, some of these districts are much more low income than where we live, and don't have as many opportunities. And so for some voters, they might go, that's a trade I'm willing to make. Others might say, no, I think you need to abide by your beliefs regardless. I think there's also a difference between, in this case, that vote changed the outcome of something that was very sort of a core principle and tenet, and a very wedge issue right now between Democrats and Republicans. I think there might have been more forgiveness if you said, well, hey, I voted for the Republican budget, which was going to pass anyway, because it then meant that I could bring home these couple of opportunities for my district. I think people go, okay, well, it wasn't going to change the outcome. So if you could use your vote to get something in the bill for your district, then we're more comfortable with that than using your vote in a way that changes the outcome and overrides Governor Stein's veto on something that people are very, very passionate about. So I think there's different ways to do that. But to your point, there are folks who've identified that as a Democrat, when Republicans need one or two votes, if I'm willing to be that one or two votes, I can get something in return for it. And again, I don't mean that in any sort of an illegal or quid pro quo. I guess it is kind of quid pro quo, but it's within the rules of the game here.
Squid pro quo, Mr. Powers.
To do something,
do you know what that is?
For their district. No, I assume it's Austin Powers.
Yes.
You said Mr.
Well
Powers,
done.
but anyway,
all right, so
those
we're
are going
not
to be very, very
they
close.
will.
And the Cunningham race and the McFadden race in Mecklenburg County are certainly going to be the two that everybody has their eyes on in the primary, which I did confirm is Tuesday, March 3rd.
If only there was a new organization that you could call with help crafting these strategies and talking points.
I don't know that we're going to be in the business of helping people craft their talking points for controversial votes.
That's true.
but
many others with complicated talking points. So that was a great start to the lightning round, as we're very well known for.
We have very slow, drawn out.
So we're going to
lightning.
just very quickly hit on a couple others. I am going to make the executive decision not to talk about transit and transportation,
which
and
we'll be
safety.
talking about probably
we're
an
gonna talk
episode ever.
a ton about that. That'll be big. Quick hit. I hit my radar, something I'm very interested in, that Corning Meta $6 billion deal that was announced. Hickory is going to be the recipient and beneficiary of that. AI data centers is a massive topic that I've been tracking for a long time. This is a fiber optics deal that will provide a ton of this for Meta. And again, I think the punchline here, if you're looking into this stuff and starting to pay attention, on one side of the coin, it's become very controversial when these things pop up and neighborhoods absolutely activate against the having it in their backyard. And there's a lot of other challenges, whether it's power in the power grid or the water usage, all that stuff. But on this side, it's a huge boon to the tax base. And it's something that if we don't do it, China is going to absolutely dominate this space, and we cannot afford it. So you've got these this really important topic in the middle, and these two opposing forces where it doesn't just have to be, here are the talking points that solve and disarm this. It can be, what are the negotiated community benefits, the things needed to make it a win for all? And I'm really interested to see how that pans out.
And as with all of that, the answer needs to be somewhere in the middle, because we can't just not do anything, to your point, or other countries are going to lead and put us at real risk. But we also can't just say, well, then let's pull up all the guardrails and do it no matter what.
Yep, exactly.
There's got to be some compromise in there.
Okay, any food quick hit items? You love food.
I feel like we should have a food little sub-segment every week. But, actually a bunch of great stuff has been happening in Charlotte and in North Carolina, both. I guess it's maybe been 2 months now since the Michelin Awards were announced. We have a restaurant that got a Michelin star. We have a number of restaurants that got Michelin recommendations. And then we have just last week, I believe, the James Beard semifinalists were announced. And Asheville, Charlotte, Raleigh, Cary, Wilmington, I think all had nominees, some of them multiple. So there's a lot of great things happening in that. And, for a state that has as big of a tourism business as we have, and people think about, obviously, the mountains and the beach, but the culinary tourism, and all you got to do is think about Charleston, South Carolina, and what Greenville, South Carolina, frankly, has become, which is inland and doesn't have the natural beach or the mountain appeal, but has become a culinary destination. We are starting to get some of that same momentum, and it really does move the needle. And if you don't think you care about tourism, or if you find it annoying that you're at the beach or the mountains and there's more traffic than there used to be, just think about how much it's saving you as a taxpayer when these people come in and spend all this money and pay taxes into a state they don't live in. So this is something that's great for our economy, and our region has, you and I moved here in the mid 2000s. Charlotte was not a culinary destination.
No,
in the
and again,
it was corporate steakhouses.
That is why the local news, the local understanding of the decisions, like at that time, Johnson and Wales, our culinary university, coming to town in the midst of like Charlotte being joked on like England for not having any kind of food that's worthwhile.
We had good old school versions of Southern fried food, and we had corporate steakhouses and a very small number
and beef and bottle that was still here.
Oh, beef and bottle's amazing, but
not the amount we have now.
Yeah,
exactly. So again, it's how those decisions come into play and all kind of stack on each other to create now an environment where we're becoming known.
And actually, we'll probably dig into this particular company more in a future episode, but anecdotal story, we talk about, obviously, things get touted about Charlotte being and North Carolina being a great state to do business, and all these companies moving here and all this stuff. Well, these kind of things factor into it too, the arts and the culture and the hospitality and the dining and all. There's an anecdotal story about one of the leaders of Scout Motors, which, again, I'm sure we'll talk about them at length at some point. But coming to Charlotte to do a visit as they were looking at a bunch of different cities, I believe it was the CEO, went to Supperland, one of the restaurants that was recently
delicious.
It's gotten a lot of these sort of recognitions, and had such an amazing experience there, and then walking around Plaza Midwood after dinner, that he was like, that helped him see this is a place we could be, and that like people are going to want to live and people are going to want to work. And if you don't have those things, you can offer all the incentives in the world, but if you don't have a place that people want to live and feel like the quality of life for their family is going to be good and all this, you're still not going to win. And so there are all these little puzzle pieces that go into us being a city that can attract a company like that to move their headquarters.
And now we've got, from food arrives Scout, awesome company with all of the cars. I love those old school cars. And now there's a headquarters, much like we talked about last week on Capital Night as well, the new headquarters from PSA Airlines, subsidiary of American. So there's so many stories we can get in there.
Lots of good momentum.
The last point I'd make, just for those of you looking for research, wanting to pay attention but not knowing where, the short list, we are entering the most important time of the year from a municipal perspective, the city council budget season. While it was, due to the winter storm, delayed a little bit, Larken, I think into next week, I think the things you want to pay attention to are, there's the first step, which is the council gets together in a kind of a workshop setting and says all the things they care about, and the manager and staff kind of take that in and think about it, analyze it. Then over a period of time, the next couple of weeks later, the manager releases a budget, goes from being his budget to the council's budget, and says, here's my proposed budget. and then they go through a series of workshops that leads to them understanding, asking questions, making tweaks, and then ultimately them passing a budget. So all that is coming up. It is the most important time for policy and budget changes in our community to decide what gets invested in and what doesn't.
And 3 of those 11 council members are new members, so maybe we try to get a couple of them on, better understand what their priorities are, because as is always the case, there's some new blood on council, and when there are new priorities and new focuses and new alliances that sort of form on the council. And there's going to be the dynamic that we're going to be watching, and I think it's going to have I don't know what impact it will have on council, but it will have an impact on council, that it is expected that Mayor Lyles, who is now starting her 5th term as mayor, will likely not run for re-election in 2027. There are a number of people on council now, a handful of former council members, and some who've never been on council but have maybe been in other office or civic leaders or whatever. There are a whole lot of people that are flirting with the idea of running for mayor in 2027, a number of which are on the current city council. And so the dynamics at play there, I think watching people sort of prioritize the thing that they think they can run on, or that is their main pet issue or whatever, is going to be very interesting to watch.
Watching 3 new people, which is a material amount, come on board, and seeing how the coalitions change is by itself a lot. But overlaying that with the fact that several are hinting without saying it that they are interested in being the next mayor.
The slowest launches ever.
The point there is, I think over this next 2 years, we're going to see a very different view of how coalitions build. It will be more transactional and topical to get to 6 votes, rather than it being the same kind of groups time and time again that come together.
Yeah, I mean, when we got sworn onto the council in 2017, Mayor Lyles was being sworn in as mayor for the first time, and it was presumed that she would serve several terms. So back then, not to say that there's not jockeying, there's always jockeying going on, but back then, none of us were necessarily looking for a political leg up on anyone else we were serving with, because we all sort of thought, well, we'll all be in the seats we're in for a couple of years.
Forever.
And so we weren't necessarily looking at each other as competitors, not in that sense. And so I think it will change the way that things go these 2 years, and we'll try to help navigate it.
Well, this is coming to the end of episode 1 of R&D and the NC. We've got to start remembering
that.
A
flashy, good-looking new logo that's going to be rolling out here with this episode.
We have all kinds of back office support and prod and everything. And for me,
the AV's a little more high quality than it was in your 10-square-foot council office.
And this is just the beginning. It's going to get bigger and better from here. But I think the thing I'm most excited about for you true old nerd fans and listeners from back in the day that have made it this far is it is great to be back. I hope it feels very nostalgic and familiar to you to be able to hear long form ramblings. This was a little more rambling.
2 washed up politicians.
A little more rambling than I think the future episodes are going to have.
No, I think it's probably
it'll probably be the exact same. But it's great to be back and be able to build on this. And as always, we want to hear from you to hear what kind of topics, what kind of things we should dive into more in the future. And with that, Larken, any final words?
Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
See ya.